When my son-in-law told me I was not welcome for Christmas, I smiled and walked away. I got in my car, drove to the end of the block, and made exactly one phone call. By New Year's Day, their mortgage payments were canceled because I was the bank, and the bank was closed for business. Before I tell you how I legally evicted my own ungrateful family from the mansion, I bought them. Tell me in the comments if you have ever sacrificed your own comfort for people who treat you like a burden. My name is Garrison Ford. I am 69 years old, and for the last 40 years I have lived by one simple rule. Numbers do not lie. People lie. Smiles lie. Even family lies. But a ledger is the only thing in this world that tells you the brutal, unvarnished truth. I spent 3 decades as the chief financial officer for a logistics firm in Chicago. I know how to spot a bad investment from a mile away. The tragedy of my life is not that I lost my money. I have plenty of money. The tragedy is that I poured my life savings into the worst investment a man can ever make. I invested in my daughter and her husband. It was December 24th. The wind off Lake Michigan was cutting through the streets like a serrated knife. I was driving my 10-year-old sedan, a car that rattled every time I went over 40 miles per hour. The heater had broken 2 weeks ago, but I hadn't fixed it. I told myself I was being frugal. I told myself I didn't need luxury. The truth was, every spare dollar I had generated in the last 3 years had gone into the account of the people I was driving to see. On the passenger seat next to me sat a large box wrapped in silver paper. It was a vintage electric train, set the exact model my granddaughter Lily had pointed at in the catalog months ago. It cost $800. I had skipped my own blood pressure medication refill this month to ensure I could buy it without touching the principal of my retirement fund. That is what fathers do. That is what grandfathers do. We strip pieces of ourselves away to build a foundation for the next generation. We assume that when we are old and the wind is cold, they will offer us a seat by the fire. We assume that love is a transaction where the currency is loyalty. I was about to learn that my currency was worthless. I turned onto the long, winding driveway of the property in the suburbs. It was a beautiful house. 4,000 square feet colonial style with a 3-car garage and a manicured lawn that was currently buried under 6 inches of fresh white snow. I knew the dimensions of the house by heart because I had read them on the deed. I knew the interest rate on the mortgage because I had written the contract. I had purchased this house through my LLC 3 years ago and sold it to my daughter Beatrice and her husband Todd. I gave them a private mortgage with 0% interest. They paid me what they could when they could, or at least that was the agreement. In the last 6 months, they had paid me exactly $0. But tonight was Christmas Eve. I wasn't there to collect a debt. I was there to see my 7-year-old granddaughter open her train set. I pulled my rusted sedan up behind a line of cars. There was a brand new black pickup truck parked right in front of the entrance. It was lifted with custom rims and chrome detailing. It looked like a monster truck parked in a residential driveway. It still had the temporary dealer plates on it. I stared at that truck for a long moment. Todd, my son-in-law, worked part-time as a real estate broker. He hadn't closed a sale in 6 months. Beatrice worked as a substitute teacher. They told me last week they couldn't afford to fix the boiler in the basement. Yet here was a vehicle that cost more than my first house. I pushed the thought down. I told myself not to be the grumpy old man. I told myself to be generous. Maybe it was a lease. Maybe it was a loaner. I grabbed the heavy silver box and stepped out into the snow. The cold bit into my knuckles immediately. I walked up the stone path that I had paid to have repaved last summer. I could hear music coming from inside. It was jazz, loud and festive. I could see shadows dancing behind the sheer curtains of the living room. I could smell roast turkey and sage stuffing. The smell made my stomach rumble. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I had been saving my appetite for the family dinner. I rang the doorbell. I fixed a smile on my face. I prepared to shout, "Merry Christmas." The door, didn't fly open. It opened just a crack about 6 inches. Todd stood there. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that I knew for a fact cost $300 because I had given him the money for his birthday to buy a suit for interviews, and he had bought that sweater instead. He didn't open the door fully. He blocked the gap with his body. "Hey, Garrison," he said. He didn't call me Dad. He hadn't called me Dad in 2 years. "Merry Christmas." "Todd," I said, shifting the heavy box in my arms. The wind was whipping snow against the back of my neck. "It is freezing out here." "Let me in." Todd didn't move. He ran a hand through his hair, looking back over his shoulder as if checking to see if anyone was watching. "Look, Garrison, this is awkward," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was supposed to be conspiratorial but just sounded cowardly. "We are kind of having a thing right now." "I know," I said, still smiling, though the muscles in my cheeks were starting to twitch. "It is Christmas Eve. That is why I am here. I brought Lily's present." Todd sighed. It was a long, exaggerated sigh, the kind you give a child who doesn't understand simple instructions. "Yeah, about that," he said. "Patricia is here. My mom. And you know how she gets. She says you make her uncomfortable. She says you are always judging us, looking at the furniture, asking about the bills. We just wanted a relaxed night. A private family night." The words hung in the freezing air between us. Private family night. I looked past his shoulder. I could see the hallway. I saw lights. I saw a waiter walking by with a tray of champagne flutes. A waiter. They had hired catering. "Todd," I said, my voice staying calm, though my heart had started to hammer a strange rhythm against my ribs. "I drove 40 minutes in a blizzard. I have a 20-pound box in my arms. Are you telling me I cannot come inside the house that I pay for?" Todd's face hardened. The mask of polite awkwardness slipped, revealing the arrogance underneath. "It is our house, Garrison," he snapped. "Beatrice and I are on the deed. Just because you helped us with the financing doesn't mean you own our lives. You can't just show up unannounced and expect us to drop everything." "It is rude." "I wasn't unannounced," I said. "I come every year. It is tradition." "Not this year," a female voice cut in. Todd stepped aside slightly, and there she was. Patricia, Todd's mother. She was 60 years old, but dressed like she was 25 in a tight red dress that clashed with her heavy makeup. She was holding a crystal wine glass filled with dark red liquid. I recognized the bottle on the hallway table behind her. It was a Chateau Margaux, a vintage I had given Beatrice for her 10th wedding anniversary, telling her to save it for a truly special occasion. They had cracked it open for a party I wasn't invited to. "Oh, Mr. Ford," Patricia said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You look positively frozen. But really, you should have called. We have guests, important guests, people from Todd's crypto investment group. We can't have you sitting there asking them for their W-2 forms and depressing everyone with your talk about savings bonds and inflation. It is a celebration, not a funeral." I looked at her. I looked at the wine glass. Then I looked deeper into the house. "Beatrice," I called out. My daughter walked into the hallway. She didn't look at me. She looked at her shoes. She was wearing a pearl necklace that had belonged to my late wife, her mother. My wife had made me promise on her deathbed that I would always take care of our little girl. I had kept that promise. I had broken my back keeping that promise. "Beatrice, I said, my voice cracking just a little. "Beatrice, tell your husband to open the door." Beatrice bit her lip. She looked at Todd, who was glaring at her. Then she looked at Patricia, who raised an eyebrow, daring her to speak. Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but her chin was set in a stubborn line. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Just go. Don't cause a scene. You know how stressed Todd gets. He is on the verge of a big breakthrough with his business. He needs this networking night. Just leave the present on the porch. We will tell Lily you stopped by. Leave the present on the porch, like I was a delivery driver. Like I was an Amazon courier, not the man who had paid for the porch, the door, the roof, and the heat that was currently keeping them warm while I stood in the snow. A silence stretched out. It was louder than the wind, louder than the jazz music. It was the sound of a cord snapping, an invisible umbilical cord that had tethered me to this house and these people for 3 decades, finally severed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. A strange calm washed over me. It was the same calm I used to feel when I walked into a board meeting to announce a corporate restructuring. It was the cold, clinical detachment of a man who has looked at the spreadsheet and realized the project is a failure. It is time to cut losses. It is time to liquidate assets. I understand, I said. Todd looked surprised. He had expected a fight. He had expected me to yell so he could play the victim and call the police. You do? Todd asked. Yes, I said. You want privacy. You want to be the man of the house. You want to host your investors without the old man hovering over you. I completely understand. I bent down and placed the silver box on the welcome mat. The snow immediately began to wet the bottom of the wrapping paper. Give Lily my love, I said. Good night, Garrison, Patricia chirped, taking a sip of my wine. Drive safe. The roads are treacherous for seniors. Todd slammed the door. I heard the lock click. Then I heard the deadbolt slide home. I stood there for 5 seconds, staring at the wood grain of the door. I remembered the day I bought that door. I remembered writing the check for $3,000 because Beatrice wanted solid mahogany. I turned around and walked back to my car. The wind was hitting my face directly now, but I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the cold at all. I felt a fire burning in my stomach, a clean, white-hot fire of absolute clarity. I got into my sedan. The engine groaned before turning over. I sat in the dark, my hands gripping the freezing steering wheel. I looked at the house one last time. I saw the silhouette of Todd in the window laughing, raising a glass. He thought he had won. He thought he had banished the nuisance. He had no idea he had just evicted himself. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was 7:30 on Christmas Eve. Most lawyers were at home with their families. But Ross wasn't most lawyers. Ross was a shark I had kept on retainer for 20 years. He didn't have a family. He had billable hours. I dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring. Merry Christmas, Garrison Ross, said his voice sounding bored. To what do I owe the pleasure, Ross? I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded like metal grinding on stone. I need you to open the file on the Ford Family Trust and the LLC property at 42 Oak Creek Drive. There was a pause on the other end. Ross knew that file. He had drafted it. Is everything okay, Garrison? No, I said. Everything is perfect. But I want to activate Clause 13. Clause 13. Ross asked, his tone shifting from bored to sharp. Garrison, that is the nuclear option. That is the acceleration clause. If you trigger that, you are demanding full repayment of the principal immediately. You are claiming breach of contract. I know what it is, I said, watching the lights of the mansion twinkle in the night. I wrote it. You need cause, Garrison Ross warned. You can't just call a note due because they didn't invite you to dinner. You need proof of financial mismanagement or unauthorized use of the collateral. I have cause, I said. I saw a truck in the driveway, Ross. An $80,000 truck. And I know for a fact they haven't paid property tax in 2 quarters because I got the notice last week and paid it myself to avoid a lien. That is a start, Ross said. I can hear the clicking of his keyboard in the background. But to make it stick, to really nail them to the wall, we need a full audit. We need to prove they are misappropriating the funds you gave them for maintenance and the grandchild's education. Then do it, I commanded. I want a forensic audit of every dime I sent them in the last 36 months. I want you to pull their credit reports. I want to know where every cent of the equity line of credit went. And Ross, yes. I want the foreclosure paperwork drafted by tomorrow morning. I want it on my desk when I walk in. Garrison Ross said softly. It is Christmas. I know, I said. I looked at the house where my daughter was drinking my wine, and my son-in-law was laughing at my expense. Merry Christmas, Ross. Execute the order. I hung up the phone. I put the car in gear. As I drove away, leaving the warm glow of the mansion behind in the rearview mirror, I didn't feel lonely. I felt powerful. They wanted a life without me, fine. I would give them exactly that. But first I was going to teach them a lesson about economics that they would never forget. The free ride was over, and the bill was coming due. Christmas morning in Chicago is usually a symphony of church bells and children laughing. But on the 25th floor of the Ford Holdings building, the only sound was the hum of the central heating system and the rhythmic scratching of a fountain pen on paper. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the empty streets. The city looked like a model set covered in gray slush. It was 8 in the morning. I should have been drinking hot cocoa. I should have been helping Lily assemble the tracks for her new train set. Instead, I was drinking black coffee that tasted like battery acid and staring at the back of my lawyer's head. Ross sat at the mahogany conference table. He had not shaved. He was wearing a wrinkled dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he looked like a man who had been awake all night hunting. The table usually reserved for board meetings and mergers was buried under a blizzard of bank statements, credit reports, and printed emails. It was a crime scene, and the victim was my bank account. I turned away from the window and walked to the table. The silence in the room was heavy. Ross didn't look up. He just slid a single piece of paper across the polished wood. It stopped right at the edge, waiting for me. Read it, Ross said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. But brace yourself, Garrison. You are not going to like it. I picked up the paper. It was a transaction history for the account labeled Lily Education Trust. I had established this fund 3 days after my granddaughter was born. Every month, like clockwork, an automatic transfer of $2,000 went from my personal savings into this trust. By my calculations, there should have been nearly $200,000 in there, factoring in the compound interest I had secured through low-risk municipal bonds. I looked at the balance at the bottom of the page. 0. Not a single cent. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the winter outside. My hands didn't shake. They froze. I looked at the withdrawal column. It wasn't one lump sum. It was a slow, steady bleed. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. The descriptions were vague. Miscellaneous expenses, consulting fees, administration costs. Who authorized this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I am the trustee. I am the only one who can sign for this. Ross finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. They forged your signature, Garrison. Or rather, Todd did. He used a digital signature stamp that he must have copied from one of your old real estate closing documents. It is clumsy amateur work. A blind bank teller could have spotted it if they were looking, but because the last name matched, nobody flagged it. I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the table like a dead leaf. That money was her future. That was her college tuition. That was her safety net. And he stole it. He stole from a 7-year-old child. It gets worse, Ross said. He didn't offer sympathy. He knew I didn't want pity. I wanted ammunition. He opened a second folder. This one was thicker. He pulled out a glossy brochure for a dealership. It was for the truck. The black monster I had seen in the driveway the night before. The sticker price was circled in red marker. $82,000. I traced the line from the education fund withdrawals to the dealership deposit. The dates matched perfectly. On October 12th, he pulled $15,000 from Lily's school money. On October 13th, he put a down payment on a vehicle that gets 12 miles to the gallon. He bought a toy, I said. He robbed my granddaughter to buy a toy to impress his friends. And to impress his investors, Ross corrected me. He pulled out the final stack of papers. This is the part that technically constitutes wire fraud, Garrison. Look at these credit card statements. These are business cards issued to the LLC for property maintenance. You authorized them for repairs, roof leaks, plumbing, electrical work. I looked at the statements. There were no hardware stores listed. There were no contractors. Instead, there were dozens of charges to an online exchange platform called Crypto Moon. He is gambling, I realized. The nausea in my stomach was replaced by a hard, jagged anger. He calls it investing, Ross said dryly. Todd has been funneling maintenance funds and the education trust into a speculative cryptocurrency that has lost 60% of its value in the last 3 months. He thinks he is a day trader. He thinks he can earn it all back before you notice. He is betting the house, Garrison. Literally. I sat down in the leather chair opposite Ross. I closed my eyes for a moment. I saw Todd's face. I saw his smug smile as he blocked the door. I saw Patricia sipping my wine. They weren't just ungrateful, they were parasites. They had looked at my kindness and seen a weakness to be exploited. They had looked at my silence and mistaken it for ignorance. How much, I asked. Give me the total damage. Ross tapped his calculator. Including the education fund, the unauthorized credit card debt, and the unpaid property taxes. I found this morning the total misappropriation is $240,000. That is not including the mortgage principal. $250,000, I repeated. I stood up. The fatigue was gone. The shock was gone. I felt sharp. I felt dangerous. I buttoned my coat. Where are you going? Ross asked, though I think he already knew. I am going to lunch, I said. I checked my watch. It is almost noon. They will be sitting down to roast turkey and stuffing. They will be raising glasses to their success. They will be talking about how they successfully kept the old man out in the cold. Ross stood up and handed me a thick manila envelope. It was heavy. It contained the audit summaries, the evidence of forgery, and the foreclosure notice he had drafted at 4 a.m. Do not lose your temper, Garrison Ross warned. If you hit him, we lose the moral high ground. If you scream, he records it and plays the victim. I took the envelope. I tucked it under my arm. It felt like a weapon. I am not going to hit him, Ross. I am a businessman. I don't get mad. I get even. I walked to the elevator. The doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the numbers counted down, I adjusted my tie in the reflection of the metal doors. I didn't look like a grandfather anymore. I looked like the CFO who used to fire incompetent managers without blinking. I walked out into the cold Chicago air. The snow was still falling, covering the city in a blanket of white. It was beautiful. It was silent. It was the perfect day for an eviction. I got into my car and turned the key. The engine roared to life. I wasn't bringing a train set this time. I was bringing the truth. And for Todd and Patricia, the truth was going to be much colder than the blizzard outside. The drive back to the house at 42 Oak Creek Drive took exactly 35 minutes. I did not speed. I did not run any red lights. I drove with the steady, terrifying precision of a man delivering a death sentence. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the world bright and blindingly white. But inside my car, the air was heavy with the weight of the manila envelope sitting on the passenger seat. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Lunchtime. I pulled into the driveway. The black monster truck was still there, parked diagonally across 2 spaces as if it owned the pavement. I parked my rusted sedan right behind it, blocking it in. If Todd wanted to leave in his new $80,000 toy, he was going to have to go through me first. I walked up the path. I didn't ring the doorbell this time. I didn't knock. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. It was a master key, the kind landlords keep for emergencies. And this was an emergency, a moral emergency. I turned the lock. The mechanism clicked smoothly. I pushed the door open and stepped into the warmth of the hallway. The house smelled of roasted turkey sage stuffing and expensive red wine. It was the smell of a celebration I had paid for but was forbidden to taste. I could hear them in the dining room, the clinking of silverware against china, the sound of liquid being poured. Laughter. I walked down the hallway. My footsteps were muffled by the thick Persian runner rug I had bought 3 Christmases ago. I stopped at the archway of the dining room and just watched them for a moment. They looked like a picture from a magazine. Todd sat at the head of the table carving the turkey with an electric knife. Patricia was to his right, her face flushed with wine, laughing at something he had said. Beatrice sat opposite her, looking tired, but forcing a smile. And there, at the far end of the table, was an empty chair. My chair. Todd was the first to see me. The electric knife slipped screeching against the ceramic platter. The noise cut through the laughter like a guillotine blade. Garrison Todd said, his voice a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "What are you doing here? I thought we made it clear. This is a private lunch." I didn't answer. I walked to the table. I didn't look at Beatrice. I couldn't look at her yet. If I looked at her eyes and saw the fear there, I might lose my resolve. I kept my eyes fixed on Todd. I walked until I was standing right next to him. He was still holding the carving knife, looking up at me with that arrogant tilt of his chin that always made my hands itch. "You forgot something," I said. I raised the manila envelope and let it drop. It hit the center of the table with a heavy, dull thud, knocking over a crystal salt shaker. The audit report slid out, fanning across the holiday tablecloth. Rows of numbers highlighted in neon yellow stared up at them. "What is this?" Patricia asked, reaching for her glasses. "Is this another lecture on budgeting, honestly, Garrison, on Christmas Day? You really are a joy kill." "It is not a lecture, Patricia." I said, my voice low and steady. "It is an autopsy." Todd looked down at the papers. I watched his eyes scan the lines. I saw the moment he recognized the account numbers. I saw the moment he saw the highlighted withdrawals from the education trust. I saw the moment he saw the dealership invoice stapled to the back. His face didn't pale with shame. It didn't crumple with guilt. Instead, it hardened. His jaw set, and a dark flush of anger crept up his neck. He dropped the carving knife onto the platter. "You audited us," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "You went behind my back and audited my family's finances." I leaned down, placing my hands on the table, invading his personal space. "I didn't audit your family, Todd. I audited my company. Because that is what this is. This house, the cars, the accounts. They are all assets of Ford Holdings. And you are just a liability that I am about to write off." Beatrice finally spoke. Her voice was trembling. "Dad, please. What is going on? What are those papers?" "Ask him," I said, not taking my eyes off Todd. "Ask your husband where Lily's college fund went. Ask him why a 7-year-old girl is paying for a truck that gets 12 miles to the gallon. Ask him about the $60,000 sent to a crypto exchange in the Cayman Islands." Beatrice turned to Todd. She looked terrified. "Todd, is that true?" "The college money." Todd stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He threw his napkin onto the table. "Oh, stop it!" Todd shouted, waving his hand dismissively. "Stop acting like it is a crime. It is asset management, Beatrice. I moved the capital. I reallocated resources. You think that money was doing anything sitting in a savings account, earning 2% interest? That is loser thinking. That is old man thinking. He pointed a finger at me, shaking it in my face. You think you are so smart, Garrison, but you are a dinosaur. I took that money and I put it into high-growth assets. Yes, the market is down right now. Yes, on paper it looks like a loss. But it will bounce back. It always bounces back. I was going to double that money before Lily even graduated high school. I was doing you a favor. You stole $200,000, I said. You forged my signature. That is not investing, Todd. That is a felony. Todd laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. A felony. You are going to call the cops on me, on your son-in-law, on the father of your grandchild. Go ahead. See how that looks. See how Lily reacts when her grandpa sends her daddy to jail. He smirked, leaning back and crossing his arms. He knew my weakness. He knew I would walk through fire to keep Lily from crying. Besides, he continued, his voice dripping with condescension. Let's be real here, Garrison. You are 69 years old. You have high blood pressure. You live in a shoebox apartment and drive a piece of junk car. What are you saving all this money for? You can't take it with you. The room went dead silent. Even Patricia stopped drinking her wine. Excuse me, I asked. You heard me, Todd said, emboldened by his own arrogance. He walked around the table, pacing like he was addressing a jury. You are hoarding wealth, Garrison. Millions of dollars sitting in accounts while we, your actual family, are struggling to maintain the lifestyle we deserve. Beatrice works herself to death. My mom needs support. And you sit on your pile of gold like a dragon. He stopped in front of me, looking me up and down with disgust. Ideally, that money is going to be ours one day anyway, he said. When you kick the bucket, who do you think inherits it, Beatrice? And by extension, me. All I did was take an advance. I accessed my future inheritance a little early to help the family now. I didn't steal from you, Garrison. I just skipped the waiting period. You should be thanking me for taking the initiative instead of waiting for you to die. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It was the sensation of a door slamming shut forever. The final lock turning. I looked at Patricia. She was nodding in agreement, swirling the wine in her glass. He has a point, Mr. Ford, she said. Her voice slurred but vicious. You are so stingy. You treat money like it is holy. Family is about sharing. You should be happy Todd is ambitious. Most men his age are lazy. My son is a visionary. If you weren't so obsessed with control, you would see that he is trying to build an empire for your daughter. But no, you just want to control everyone with your checkbook. I looked at Beatrice. She was crying silently, tears dripping onto her plate. Beatrice, I said softly. Do you agree with this? Do you think I am just a bank account waiting to die? Beatrice looked up. Her eyes darted to Todd, who was glaring at her with a warning look. Then she looked at Patricia. She took a deep breath. Dad, she said, her voice weak. Todd is just stressed. He didn't mean it like that. Maybe if you just sat down and we talked about it, maybe you could sign a retroactive approval for the transfer, just to fix the paperwork. We can pay you back when the crypto market goes up. Please, for Lily, retractive approval. She wanted me to legalize the theft. She wanted me to sign a permission slip for the man who had just told me he was waiting for me to die. I looked at the three of them, the vultures. They were well-fed, well-dressed, and warm in the house I paid for, eating the food I paid for, drinking the wine I paid for. And they hated me for it. They hated me because my existence reminded them that they were not successful. They were just parasites feeding on a host. I picked up the manila envelope from the table. I slowly put the audit papers back inside. You are right, Todd, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I am old. I don't need all this money. I don't need this stress. Todd's face lit up. He thought he had won. He thought he had bullied the old man into submission. Exactly. he exclaimed, clapping his hands. See, I knew you would see reason. We are family Garrison. Money is just paper. Relationships are what matter. Yes, I said. Relationships are what matter. And this relationship is over. I turned to leave. Wait, what? Todd asked, his smile faltering. I stopped at the doorway and looked back. You said you took an advance on your inheritance, Todd. You said the money would be yours eventually anyway. Well, I have news for you. I am rewriting the timeline. I pulled a second document from my coat pocket. It wasn't in the envelope. It was a single sheet of paper. A foreclosure notice. I didn't hand it to them. I placed it gently on the sideboard next to the expensive vase. You have 72 hours, I said. 72 hours for what Patricia asked, her voice shrill. To pay back every single penny of the $240,000, I said. Or to get out of my house. This is our house, Todd screamed, his face turning purple. Read the contract, Todd, I said, buttoning my coat. You triggered the acceleration clause when you took out a second mortgage behind my back. You defaulted. The bank is calling in the loan. And like I said, I am the bank. I walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard the sound of a glass shattering against the wall and Todd screaming my name. Garrison. You come back here. You can't do this. It is Christmas. I walked out the front door and into the cold, clean air. I didn't look back. I got into my car and drove away. I had ruined their lunch. I had ruined their Christmas. And in 3 days I was going to ruin their lives. But as I drove through the snow for the first time in years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of obligation. I felt light. I felt free. The vultures could have the turkey carcass. They weren't getting another ounce of my flesh. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me, but it was not thick enough to muffle the sound of Patricia's voice. She was standing in the doorway, clutching her wineglass like a weapon, screaming into the winter air. Her words were sharp and ugly, designed to inflict maximum damage. She called me a miser. She called me a bitter old man who would die alone with his money. She told me that I was the reason my wife had died of stress. That last one was a lie, of course. My wife died of cancer, and I had spent every last dime of our savings trying to save her sleeping in a hospital chair for 6 months. But Patricia did not care about the truth. She only cared that the ATM machine had just walked out the door and taken the PIN code with it. I did not turn around. I did not give her the satisfaction of seeing my shoulders slump. I walked straight to my car, my boots crunching rhythmically on the snow. I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was as if I was watching a movie of my own life. I saw the old man getting into his rusted sedan. I saw the monster truck parked next to it. I saw the beautiful house that was rotting from the inside out. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The silence inside the car was instant and absolute. I took a deep breath, watching my breath fog up the windshield. My hands were steady as I put the key in the ignition. I was done. I had given them the warning. I had placed the foreclosure notice on the sideboard. Now it was just a matter of waiting for the clock to run out. I put the car in reverse, backing out of the driveway that I had paid to pave. I was halfway down the block when my phone buzzed against the center console. It vibrated aggressively, sliding across the plastic. I glanced at the screen. It was Ross. Again. I frowned. Ross never called twice in 1 hour. Ross billed in 6-minute increments, and he hated wasting time. I had just left his office. I had just executed the plan we discussed. There was no reason for him to be calling unless the building was on fire. I pressed the answer button on the steering wheel. I did it, Ross, I said, keeping my eyes on the icy road. I dropped the bomb. They are currently screaming at each other. The 72-hour clock has started. Garrison, pull over, Ross said. His voice was different. In the 30 years I had known him through market crashes, lawsuits, and corporate hostile takeovers, I had never heard Ross sound like this. He sounded urgent. He sounded almost frightened. "I am driving, Ross. I just want to go home and pull the car over." Garrison Ross barked. "Now. You need to hear this sitting down." I hit the brakes. The car skidded slightly on a patch of black ice before coming to a rest against the curb. I put it in park. My heart started to beat a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "I am pulled over," I said. "What is it? Did they call you?" "No," Ross said. He was typing furiously in the background. "After you left, I decided to run one last deep dive search on the property title. I wanted to make sure there were no mechanics liens or unpaid contractor bills that could complicate the foreclosure. I dug into the county clerk's daily filings. The digital records just updated 10 minutes ago. And I asked. Garrison Todd didn't just raid the trust fund," Ross said. He paused and I could hear him take a sharp breath. "He took out a second mortgage." I stared at the gray dashboard of my car. I tried to process the words, but they didn't make sense. "That is impossible," I said. "I hold the first mortgage. The deed has a restrictive covenant. He cannot encumber the property without my written consent. No reputable bank would lend him a dime in second position without contacting me first." "It wasn't a bank," Ross said grimly. "It was a private lender, a company called Apex Capital Solutions." I looked them up. "They are a predatory lender, Garrison. They specialize in high-risk bridge loans, hard money. They charge 18% interest, and they don't check with the primary lien holder because they don't care. They just file a lien against the title and hope to get paid when the house sells." I felt the blood drain from my face. "How much?" I asked. $150,000, Ross answered. "He signed the papers 3 days ago. The funds were wired yesterday." I closed my eyes. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with a sickening crunch. The $80,000 truck. The sudden confidence. The catering. The arrogance. Todd wasn't just spending the stolen trust fund money. He had cashed out the equity in the house. My house. "He bet the house," I whispered. "He literally bet the house." "Garrison, listen to me," Ross said, his voice sharp and focused. "This changes everything. This isn't just a breach of contract anymore. This is a catastrophe for him, but it is a golden ticket for us." "Explain," I said, though my mind was already racing ahead, connecting the legal dots. "Your private mortgage note has a standard clause," Ross said. "Clause 4, Section B, the due on sale or encumbrance clause. It states that if the borrower places any additional liens on the property without the lender's permission, the entire loan becomes immediately due and payable. Not in 72 hours. Immediately." "I know the clause," I said. "I wrote it to protect the asset." "But it gets better," Ross continued. "Because this Apex Capital loan is predatory, it classifies the property as distressed. By signing that document, Todd has technically engaged in title fraud because he represented to Apex that he had the authority to leverage the home. He didn't just break your contract. He broke the law again." "So I can take it now," I said. "Right now," Ross confirmed. "You don't have to wait for the 3-day notice to cure. You don't have to wait for missed payments. The moment that lien hit the county record, he defaulted. You can change the locks today. You can call the sheriff today." I looked out the window. Snow was starting to fall again, soft and silent. I thought about Beatrice. I thought about my granddaughter Lily sleeping in her room, completely unaware that her father had just sold the roof over her head to a loan shark for a pickup truck and some digital coins. If I foreclose now, I asked, what happens to the Apex loan? "That is the best part," Ross said, and I could hear the cold smile in his voice. "You are the primary lien holder. You are in the first position. When you foreclose, you wipe out all junior liens. Apex Capital loses their claim on the house. They will have to go after Todd personally for the money. They will garnish his wages. They will seize his assets. They will seize that truck, but they cannot touch the house. You get the property back free and clear." I sat there for a long moment. I realized that Todd had not just dug his own grave. He had jumped into it, poured the concrete, and handed me the shovel. He had been so greedy, so desperate to look rich, that he had destroyed his only safety net. "He thought he was smart," I said softly. "He thought he could leverage my asset to make himself rich and then pay me off before I noticed." "He is a fool," Garrison Ross said. "But now he is a dangerous fool. If he has $150,000 in cash sitting in an account somewhere, he might try to run. Or he might try to hide it. We need to move fast." I looked at the clock on the dashboard. It was 1:30 in the afternoon on Christmas Day. "Prepare the writ of possession," I said. "Call the sheriff's civil division. I know the captain. Tell him it is an emergency eviction based on criminal fraud and destruction of collateral." "On Christmas?" Ross asked. "Especially on Christmas," I said. I hung up the phone. I didn't drive away. I sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The anger was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just a father anymore. I wasn't just a grandfather. I was the chief financial officer of a failing family, and I was about to execute the most hostile takeover in history. I started the car again. I didn't turn back toward the house. Not yet. I had one stop to make first. I needed to go to my apartment. I needed to change out of my holiday sweater and into my suit. If I was going to destroy my son-in-law, I was going to do it dressed for business. Todd had wanted to be a big shot. He had wanted to play in the big leagues with high-risk loans and leveraged assets. Well, he was about to learn the most important rule of the game. The house always wins, and I was the house. I drove back to my small apartment in silence. The adrenaline of this confrontation was fading, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache in my chest. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, watching the snow pile up on the ledge. I was waiting for the fallout. I knew Todd. I knew he wouldn't apologize. I knew he wouldn't rush to the bank to fix his mistake. He would do what he always did. He would attack. At 6 in the evening, my phone chimed. It was an email. The subject line was simply "boundaries" in all capital letters. I opened it. The message was short, poorly typed, and dripping with the kind of frantic malice that only a guilty man can muster. "Garrison," it read. "Since you decided to ruin our Christmas with your psychotic threats, we are making some changes. Effective immediately, you are not to come within 500 feet of our property. You are not to contact Beatrice. And most importantly, you are forbidden from seeing Lily. We don't want our daughter exposed to your toxic, manipulative energy. If you try to contact us, we will file for a restraining order. Do not test me." I stared at the screen. I read the words "forbidden from seeing Lily" 3 times. He was using my granddaughter as a human shield. He was using a 7-year-old girl as leverage to protect his stolen lifestyle. He thought this would break me. He thought I would panic, call him, apologize, and beg to be let back into the fold. He thought I was a desperate old grandfather who would pay any price to see his bloodline. He was wrong. I was not desperate. I was methodical. And by threatening to cut me off from the only person in that house I actually loved, he had removed the last shred of mercy I had left. I didn't reply to the email. I didn't type out a furious response. I simply forwarded the email to Ross with a 2-word instruction: proceed immediately. The next morning, the sheriff's deputy, a man I had played poker with for 10 years, knocked on Todd's door. He wasn't there to deliver a holiday fruit basket. He was there to serve a formal legal notice. It was a document known as a notice of acceleration. Most people don't read the fine print of their mortgage contracts. They just sign where the notary points. But I wrote the fine print, and right there on page 14 was the acceleration clause. It stated that in the event of a default, such as placing an unauthorized second lien on the property, the lender had the right to demand the immediate repayment of the entire loan balance, not the missed payments, not the interest, the whole thing. The notice was simple. It informed Todd and Beatrice that they owed Ford Holdings exactly $650,000. The due date was not in 30 years. It was not in 30 days. It was in 72 hours. Ross told me later what happened next. He had eyes inside the local banking system. Todd didn't pack his bags. He didn't start looking for apartments. He panicked. He acted like a trapped animal. He assumed in his arrogance that he could just borrow his way out of this hole. He thought he could refinance the house with a real bank, pay me off, and tell me to go to hell. At 10 in the morning, Todd walked into the First National Bank of Chicago. He was wearing his best suit. He walked into the loan officer's office with the swagger of a millionaire. He asked for a jumbo mortgage to pay off a private lender. He told them he had significant assets. He told them he was a crypto investor. The loan officer ran his social security number. I wish I could have seen the look on Todd's face when the result came back. You see, when you max out 5 credit cards to buy mining rigs for digital coins that are crashing, your credit utilization ratio hits 100%. When you miss payments on your truck because you spent the money on catering, your score drops. And when a foreclosure notice hits the public record, which Ross had ensured happened at 9 a.m. sharp, you become radioactive. Todd's credit score wasn't just low. It was a catastrophe. It was in the low 500s. In the banking world, he was not a customer. He was a liability. The loan officer didn't just say no. He laughed. He told Todd that with his debt-to-income ratio and the active foreclosure filing, he wouldn't be able to get a loan for a toaster, let alone a mansion. Todd stormed out of the bank. He tried the next one, then the next. By noon, he had been rejected by 4 major lenders. Desperation makes people do stupid things. At 2 in the afternoon, Todd started calling his so-called investor friends. These were the people he was trying to impress at the party. He called them asking for a bridge loan. He promised them huge returns. He promised them double their money in a month. But word travels fast in the suburbs. People talk. The catering staff from the party had talked about the old man dropping foreclosure papers on the turkey. The neighbors had seen the sheriff's deputy. Todd wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was the guy who stole from his father-in-law. His friends didn't pick up the phone. His calls went to voicemail. His texts went unread. At 5 o'clock, sitting in my apartment, I saw a notification on my phone. It was from the security system I had installed in the house years ago. I still had the admin access. Todd hadn't been smart enough to change the password. I opened the app and watched the live feed from the living room camera. Todd was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. The house was quiet. The festive decorations looked mocking now. Beatrice was standing by the window, talking on the phone, her voice high and frantic. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the tone. It was the sound of a reality check hitting home. Todd stood up and kicked the coffee table. He was screaming at the air. He was trapped. He had 72 hours to find $250,000, and his pockets were full of lint and worthless crypto coins. I watched him for a minute longer, then I closed the app. I walked to my desk and picked up a framed photo of Lily. She was smiling, holding an ice cream cone. "I am coming for you, sweetheart," I whispered to the photo. "Grandpa is just taking out the trash first." I went to bed early that night. I slept like a baby. I knew that across town in the master bedroom I had paid for Todd was staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick, tick, tock. Every second was bringing him closer to the sidewalk, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. The text message I sent to Beatrice was simple. It said, "Meet me at the diner on 4th Street. Come alone. If you bring him, I leave." She didn't reply, but I knew she would come. Beatrice was many things: anxious, manipulated, tired, but she was also curious. She needed to know if there was a way out of the mess her husband had created. She needed to know if her father was really the monster Todd claimed I was. I arrived 20 minutes early. The diner was a relic from the 50s, smelling of burnt coffee and maple syrup. It was the place I used to take her for pancakes after her piano recitals when she was a little girl. Back then, her biggest worry was missing a note in a Mozart sonata. Now her biggest worry was losing the roof over her head. I sat in a booth in the back facing the door. On the table next to my black coffee sat a manila envelope. It was thinner than the financial audit I had dropped on their Christmas lunch. This one didn't contain spreadsheets. It contained pictures. When Beatrice walked in, my heart broke a little. She looked 10 years older than she had just 2 days ago. Her eyes were swollen, rimmed with red, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She was wearing a heavy coat that looked too big for her, as if she was trying to hide inside it. She scanned the room, saw me, and hesitated. For a split second, I saw the little girl who used to run into my arms. Then the wall came up. She straightened her spine, put on her defensive mask, and walked toward the booth. She sat down without taking off her coat. She didn't order anything. She just looked at me with a mixture of anger and exhaustion. "Todd says you are bluffing," she said. Her voice was flat. "He says you can't foreclose in 3 days. He says his lawyer is going to file an injunction." "Todd doesn't have a lawyer," Beatrice said gently. "Todd has a search history on LegalZoom, and I am not bluffing. The sheriff is already scheduled for the eviction." She flinched. The word eviction hit her like a physical blow. "Why are you doing this, Dad?" she whispered, and her voice cracked. "I know you hate him. I know you think he is not good enough for me. But he is my husband. We have a child. You are going to put your own granddaughter on the street just to prove a point, just to say I told you so." I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold. "I am not putting you on the street," I said. "I am getting you out of a burning building. You just don't realize the building is on fire yet. You think this is about money. You think I am angry because he bought a truck." Beatrice slammed her hand on the table. It was a weak, desperate gesture. "It is about the money. You have always been obsessed with money. You track every cent. You judge every purchase. You control us with it. Todd is right. You use your wealth as a weapon." I looked at her. I looked at the daughter I had raised to be strong, to be independent. I saw how much she had diminished under Todd's influence. He had hollowed her out, filled her head with his insecurities, and turned her against the only person who was actually protecting her. I reached for the envelope. "I am going to show you something, Beatrice," I said, "and I need you to promise me you will look at it. Really look at it. Not with Todd's voice in your head, but with your own eyes." "I don't want to see more bank statements," she said, shaking her head. "It is not a bank statement," I said. I slid the envelope across the Formica table. It stopped inches from her hand. "Todd told you he went to a crypto conference in Miami last month, didn't he?" I asked. "He said it was a networking event for high-net-worth investors. He said that was why he needed to withdraw $15,000 from the joint account." Beatrice froze. Her hand hovered over the envelope. "Yes," she said slowly. "He met with developers. It was a business trip. He called me every night." "He called you from the hallway, Beatrice," I said. "He didn't call you from the room." She stared at the envelope. Her breathing became shallow. She knew. Deep down in the place where intuition lives, she knew. But she didn't want to know. "Open it," I commanded softly. She opened the clasp with trembling fingers. She pulled out the stack of photographs. The first photo was grainy but clear enough. It showed Todd standing by a hotel pool in Miami. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing swim trunks. And he wasn't talking to developers. He was applying sunscreen to the back of a woman. She was young, she was blonde, and she was definitely not an investor. Beatrice made a small, choking sound. She shuffled to the next photo. Todd and the woman at a dinner table holding hands. Todd kissing her neck in a club. Todd buying her a necklace at a jewelry store. I watched my daughter's face crumble. The defensive mask fell away, leaving only raw, naked pain. She dropped the photos as if they were burning her skin. "Who is she?" she whispered. "Her name is Vanessa," I said. "She is 22. She is a bottle service waitress at the club where Todd claims to have meetings." Beatrice put her head in her hands. Her shoulders shook. "It was just a fling," she sobbed. "Men make mistakes. He loves me. He told me he was doing this for us. He said the stress of the business was getting to him." I reached across the table and took her hand. It was ice cold. "Beatrice, look at the last document in the envelope," I said. She shook her head. She didn't want to see any more. "Look at it," I insisted. "This is the most important part." She pulled out the last piece of paper. It was a credit card receipt. A copy of the bill from the jewelry store in Miami. The receipt for the diamond necklace in the photo. "Look at the card number used for the purchase," I said. Beatrice wiped her eyes and squinted at the paper. "It ends in 4588, she read. "Does that number look familiar?" I asked. She frowned. She pulled her wallet out of her purse. She dug through her cards until she found a blue debit card. The one with a picture of a graduation cap on it. The one labeled Lily Education Trust. She looked at the card. Then she looked at the receipt. 4588. The silence in the diner was absolute. The clattering of dishes in the kitchen faded away. The traffic outside disappeared. There was only the sound of a mother realizing that her husband hadn't just cheated on her. He had stolen from her child to pay for it. "He bought his mistress a diamond necklace with Lily's college tuition," I said. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. "He didn't just betray you, Beatrice. He robbed your daughter to impress a stranger." Beatrice stared at the card. Her face went pale, then white, then a terrifying shade of gray. The sorrow in her eyes evaporated, replaced by something else. Shock. Horror. And then finally rage. "He told me that money was for a seminar fee," she whispered. "He told me he was investing in his education, to build a future for Lily. He was investing in a 22-year-old in South Beach," I said. Beatrice crumpled the receipt in her fist. She squeezed it so hard her knuckles turned white. "He swore on Lily's life," she said, her voice shaking with a fury I had never heard before. "When I asked him about the withdrawal, he looked me in the eye and swore on our daughter's life that it was for business." I squeezed her hand. "He is a liar, Beatrice. He is a thief. And he is a narcissist who will drag you and Lily down with him until there is nothing left. He has already lost the house. He has lost his reputation. Do not let him lose your soul, too." Beatrice looked up at me. Tears were streaming down her face, but her jaw was set. She looked like me now. She looked like a Ford. "What do I do, Dad?" she asked. "I have nowhere to go." "The house. You are taking the house." "I am taking the house from him," I corrected. "I am evicting him, but I would never leave my family in the cold." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They were not for the mansion. They were for a townhouse in a quiet, safe neighborhood 3 towns over. It was a property I had bought years ago as a rental investment. It was empty. It was furnished. "Take Lily," I said. "Pick her up from school today. Don't go back to the mansion. Don't pack a bag. Just go. I will buy you new clothes. I will buy you new toys. Just get her out of that toxic environment before the sheriff arrives." Beatrice looked at the keys. Then she looked at the photos of Todd and Vanessa scattered on the table. She took a deep breath. She picked up the photos. She didn't tear them up. She put them back in the envelope. Then she picked up the receipt. She put that in the envelope too. She stood up. She buttoned her coat. She picked up the keys. "Thank you, Daddy," she said. She hadn't called me Daddy in 20 years. She turned to walk away, then stopped. She looked back at me. "He is planning a New Year's Eve party," she said. "He is going to pretend everything is fine. He thinks if he ignores you, you will go away." "I know," I said. "He is going to try to hide the assets," she warned. "He is trying to sell the furniture online right now." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Let him try," I said. Beatrice nodded. She walked out of the diner and into the snow. She didn't look back. She walked with a purpose. She wasn't waddling in fear anymore. She was marching. I watched her go. Then I signaled the waitress for the check. I left a $20 tip for a $2 coffee. I felt lighter. The hardest part was over. I had severed the limb to save the body. Beatrice was safe. Lily was safe. Now all that was left was the execution. Todd wanted a party. I would give him a party. I would give him a celebration that would end with fireworks, sirens, and the satisfying click of handcuffs. The game was set, and I held every single ace in the deck. The hardest thing a father can do is send his child back into a war zone. But as we sat in my freezing car outside the diner, watching the steam rise from the exhaust pipe, I knew that was exactly what I had to ask Beatrice to do. She had the keys to the townhouse in her pocket. She had the safety net. But if she left now, if she packed her bags and disappeared with Lily this afternoon, Todd would panic. A panicked rat does not just run, it destroys. He would empty the house. He would sell the jewelry. He would smash the family heirlooms just to spite us. "Beatrice, I said, turning to face her. The heater in my car was rattling, fighting a losing battle against the Chicago winter. "I need you to do something impossible. I need you to go back there." She looked at me, her eyes widening in fear. "Go back?" she asked. "Dad, I can't look at him. I can't sleep in that bed knowing what he did, knowing he stole from Lily." "You don't have to sleep in that bed," I said, keeping my voice firm. "You can sleep in the guest room. You can tell him you are sick. You can tell him the stress of my lawsuit is giving you migraines. But you have to be in that house until New Year's Eve." "Why?" she asked. "Because we need to keep him calm," I explained. "We need him to think he is winning. If you leave, he knows the game is up. He will take whatever cash he has left and run. He will sell your mother's pearls on Craigslist. He will liquidate the furniture. We need to keep him distracted." I saw the realization dawn on her face. She understood the strategy. It was the same strategy I used in corporate takeovers. You don't let the enemy know you are hostile until you own 51% of the stock. "What do I do?" she asked. Her voice was steady now. The fear was being replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. It was the Ford blood finally waking up. "You act," I said. "You play the role of the terrified, submissive wife one last time. You tell him you are trying to talk me down. You tell him I am crazy, that I am senile, that you are on his side. You feed his ego. Todd is a narcissist. If you tell him he is right, he will believe you. He will get sloppy." "And the party?" she asked. "He is still planning this ridiculous New Year's Eve bash. He thinks if he gets enough rich people in the room, one of them will bail him out." "Let him plan it," I said. "In fact, encourage him. Tell him it is a brilliant idea. Tell him it is the only way to save the family reputation." Beatrice frowned. "But why? Why let him spend more money?" "Because I want him distracted," I said. "I want him focused on ordering champagne and hiring DJs. I want him so busy trying to look like a king that he doesn't notice the guillotine being built in his front yard. And while he is busy planning the party, I want you to take inventory." Inventory. I want you to take pictures, I instructed. Photograph everything. The art on the walls, the electronics, the jewelry in the safe. I want a record of every single asset in that house. If even one silver spoon goes missing between now and midnight on the 31st, I want to be able to charge him with theft. Beatrice nodded. She reached into her purse and gripped her phone. I can do that, she said. There is one more thing, I added, and this is the most important part. You have to protect Lily. Keep her away from him. But don't let him use her as a prop. If he tries to put her on display for his party, you tell him she has the flu. You keep her in her room. I don't want my granddaughter seeing her father in handcuffs. Handcuffs? Beatrice asked. Her breath hitched. Is it going to come to that? He committed fraud? Beatrice, I said. He committed identity theft. He committed bank fraud. The foreclosure is just the beginning. When I walk through those doors on New Year's Eve, I am not coming alone. She stared out the window at the gray sky. She was mourning the life she thought she had. She was mourning the husband she thought she knew. But she wasn't crying anymore. Tears are for victims. Beatrice was done being a victim. Okay, she said. She opened the car door. The cold wind rushed in, biting at our faces. I will go back. I will play the part. I will be the good wife. She stepped out into the snow. She looked small against the backdrop of the city, but she stood tall. She leaned back into the car. Dad, she said. Yes, honey. Make it hurt, she said. She slammed the door and walked toward her car. I watched her go. I watched my little girl drive away to face a monster. But she wasn't alone. She had an army behind her. She had me. I put my car in gear. I had work to do. I had to meet with the sheriff. I had to finalize the paperwork with Ross. And I had to prepare my suit. Todd wanted a show for New Year's Eve. He wanted a spectacle. Well, I was going to give him the greatest show of his life. I was going to give him the grand finale of the Garrison Ford era. I drove home with a grim sense of satisfaction. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all we had to do was wait for the clock to strike midnight. December 31st arrived wrapped in a coat of ice and denial. From where I sat in my parked car down the street, 42 Oak Creek Drive, looked like a palace. The windows were glowing with warm, golden light. A valet service which Todd had hired on credit was parking luxury cars along the snowy curb. To the outside observer, this was the home of a successful, thriving family, celebrating another year of prosperity. But I knew the truth. I knew that the electricity keeping those lights on was paid for by a credit card that was 2 days away from being declined. I knew that the house itself was no longer a home, but a crime scene where the evidence was being drowned in expensive champagne. I pulled up the security feed on my tablet. I had not slept well the night before, but tonight I was wide awake. I needed to see the masquerade before I tore it down. Inside the house was transformed. Todd had gone all out. There was an ice sculpture in the foyer, a 3-foot-tall swan that was slowly melting onto the marble floor, a perfect metaphor for his life. There were waiters circulating with trays of lobster tail and caviar. Todd was standing in the center of the living room. He was wearing a tuxedo that I recognized. I had bought it for him for his wedding. He looked manic. He was laughing too loud, his movements jerky and exaggerated. He was holding a glass of scotch in one hand and gripping the shoulder of a man I recognized as a local car dealership owner. I turned up the volume on the feed. You have to get in on this. Mike Todd was saying, his voice pitching higher than normal. The returns are exponential. I am talking about doubling your liquidity in 3 weeks. I just need a short-term bridge of $50,000 to unlock the next tier of the investment. The car dealer looked uncomfortable. He tried to pull away, but Todd held on tight. I don't know, Todd, the man said. I heard rumors about some legal trouble with your father-in-law. Todd threw his head back and laughed, but his eyes were darting around the room in panic. Garrison. Please. The old man is just senile. He is confused about the paperwork. Beatrice and I are handling him. It is just a misunderstanding. We are actually buying him out of the company next month. I watched from my cold car and smiled. Buying me out. The delusion was absolute. He wasn't partying. He was pitching. He was using this party as a desperate last-ditch attempt to crowdsource the money he owed me. He thought if he looked rich enough, people would give him money. He didn't understand that wealth whispers while debt screams. The camera angle shifted to the dining room. Patricia was there, holding court. She was wearing a silver gown that was far too tight, dripping in jewelry that I hoped Beatrice had already photographed for the asset inventory. She was telling a group of women about their upcoming vacation to the Maldives. "We need the sun," Patricia said, waving her hand dismissively. "The winter here is just so depressing. Todd is chartering a private jet. We are thinking of buying a vacation home on the water." She believed it. That was the scariest part. She actually believed that her son was a financial genius who could conjure millions out of thin air. She had no idea that the only trip she was taking was to a motel 6 towns over. Then I saw Beatrice. She was walking through the kitchen supervising the caterers. She looked pale. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. She wasn't wearing the jewelry Todd had bought her. She was wearing a simple black dress. She looked like a widow at a funeral, which was appropriate because she was mourning the death of her marriage. Todd intercepted her near the stairs. He grabbed her arm, pulling her into a corner away from the guests. I zoomed in. "Where is Lily Todd?" hissed the smile dropping from his face instantly. "I told you to bring her down. The investors want to see the happy family." "She has a fever." Beatrice lied. Her voice was steady. "I rehearsed it with her. I am not bringing a sick child down to a party full of drunk people, Todd." Todd squeezed her arm. I saw Beatrice wince and my grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Go get her," Todd commanded. "Give her some Tylenol and put a dress on her. I need everyone to see that we are stable. I need this deal, Beatrice. If Mike doesn't write that check tonight, we are in trouble." Beatrice pulled her arm away. She looked him in the eye. "We are already in trouble, Todd. Don't start with me," he snapped. "Just go get the kid. And fix your face. You look miserable. Smile. This is a celebration." He pushed past her and walked back into the party, instantly pasting the fake grin back onto his face. Beatrice stood there for a moment, rubbing her arm. Then she looked up. She looked right at the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. She knew I was watching. She gave a barely perceptible nod. It was the signal. The assets were documented. Lily was safe in her room with noise-canceling headphones. The guests were all present. The stage was set. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 9:55. The party was in full swing. The music was thumping. The champagne was flowing. Todd was currently standing on a chair, tapping a spoon against his glass to make a toast. "Friends, family visionaries." Todd shouted, his slur slightly noticeable. "Thank you for coming to celebrate the best year of our lives. They say that success is the best revenge, and looking around this room, I think we have won. To the future." "To the future," the guests chorused, raising their glasses. I reached for the door handle. Beside me in the passenger seat sat Sheriff Miller. He was a big man, silent and serious. He had seen the foreclosure documents. He had seen the evidence of fraud. He adjusted his belt. "You ready, Mr. Ford?" the sheriff asked. I looked at the house one last time. I looked at the ice swan melting in the foyer. I looked at my son-in-law standing on a chair, drunk on ego and stolen money. "I am ready," I said. I opened the car door. The cold wind hit me, but it felt good. It felt cleansing. I adjusted my suit jacket. I checked my pocket to make sure I had the master key. Let's go crash a party, I said. We walked down the street together, the snow crunching under our boots. 2 patrol cars followed slowly behind us, their lights off for now. As we approached the driveway, the valet stepped forward to stop us. "Excuse me, sir," the valet said. "This is a private event. Invitation only." I didn't stop walking. I didn't even slow down. "I am the owner," I said, my voice cutting through the cold air. "And I am here to take out the trash." The valet stepped aside, looking confused. We walked up the path. The music was loud now. I could hear the bass vibrating in the doorframe. I reached out and put my hand on the doorknob, the same knob Todd had blocked just a few days ago. It was 9:59. Inside, they were waiting for the ball to drop at midnight. They didn't realize the ball was dropping 2 hours early, and it was going to crush them. I turned the handle. The door swung open. The heat and the noise rushed out to meet us. I stepped onto the marble floor right next to the melting ice sculpture. The show was over. The audit had begun. The transition from the freezing Chicago winter to the overheated, perfumed atmosphere of the foyer was jarring. It felt like stepping into a greenhouse where the plants were poisonous. The bass from the sound system was not just audible, it was physical. It thumped against my chest, mimicking the heartbeat of a man running for his life. I stood there for a moment, flanked by Sheriff Miller on my left and 2 locksmiths in heavy canvas work jackets on my right. We looked like an invasion force. We looked like reality crashing a fantasy. The guests nearest the door noticed us first. A woman in a sequined dress stopped laughing mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she took in the sheriff's uniform and the sidearm on his hip. A man holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres froze the shrimp cocktail, tilting dangerously. The ripple effect was immediate. Silence spreads faster than noise. It moved through the room like a wave, extinguishing conversations and freezing smiles. Sheriff Miller didn't need instructions. He walked straight to the corner of the room where the DJ had set up his booth. The DJ, a young kid with headphones around his neck, looked up in confusion. Miller simply reached out and pulled the main power cord from the wall. The music didn't fade out. It died instantly. The sudden silence was violent. It sucked the air out of the room, leaving only the sound of ice clinking in glasses and the nervous shuffling of feet. Todd was standing on a velvet ottoman in the center of the living room, his back to the door. He was in the middle of a sentence, his arms raised high in a victory pose. "And that is why next year is going to be our golden." He stopped. He realized the music was gone. He realized the room had gone quiet. He turned around slowly, annoyance flashing across his face. He looked like a king whose court jester had missed a cue. "Hey, who cut the sound?" "We are just getting started." His eyes found me. Then they found the sheriff. Then they found the locksmiths holding electric drills. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a physical blow. For a second, he looked like a child caught with his hand in the jar. But then the alcohol and the narcissism kicked in. His expression shifted from shock to a twisted, ugly rage. He jumped down from the ottoman, spilling his scotch onto the white rug. "Garrison," he sneered, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You have got to be kidding me. You actually showed up and you brought a cop. What is this, a scare tactic?" He pushed his way through the crowd of stunned guests. He walked with the swagger of a man who believes he is untouchable because he is wearing a tuxedo. "This is a private party, Garrison," he shouted, gesturing wildly to the room. "These are important people. You are embarrassing yourself. You are trespassing, Sheriff. Get this old man out of here. He is senile. He doesn't know what day it is." Sheriff Miller didn't move. He stood like a statue, his hands resting on his belt. I stepped forward. I unbuttoned my overcoat, revealing the suit I had worn to board meetings for 30 years. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence of the room amplified every syllable. "I know exactly what day it is, Todd," I said. "It is the day the bill comes due." Todd laughed. It was a nervous, cracking sound. Oh, save the dramatic speeches. You are drunk on power, old man. You think because you loaned me some money you own me. I told you my lawyers are handling it. We will settle this in court next month. Now get out of my house before I press charges for harassment. I turned to Ross. My attorney stepped out from behind the sheriff. He was holding a document bound in blue legal paper. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Todd with the clinical disinterest of a coroner examining a corpse. Mr. Todd Miller Ross announced, his voice projecting clearly to every corner of the room. This is not a negotiation. This is an execution of an emergency writ of possession and a freeze order issued by the Cook County Circuit Court this afternoon at 4 p.m. Todd blinked. The guests leaned in. This was better drama than anything they had seen on television. Rid of what Todd stammered. Ross continued reading, ignoring the interruption. Due to undeniable evidence of title fraud, criminal misappropriation of trust funds, and the illegal encumbrance of the property located at 42 Oak Creek Drive via a predatory second mortgage with Apex Capital, the court has granted Mr. Garrison Ford immediate possession of the property. Ross lowered the paper and looked Todd in the eye. Furthermore, because you attempted to liquidate assets during a pending investigation, the court has authorized the immediate seizure of all personal property within these walls to satisfy the outstanding debt of $650,000. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sounded like a hiss. The guests looked at each other. They looked at the expensive furniture. They looked at the champagne in their hands. They realized they were drinking stolen wine in a stolen house. That is a lie, Todd screamed. His face turned a deep, blotchy red. He looked at the guests, desperate to salvage his image. He is lying. My finances are solid. I am a victim here. This is a hostile takeover, I signaled to the locksmiths. Gentlemen, I said calmly, please change the cylinders on the front and back doors. Secure the perimeter. The locksmiths nodded and immediately set to work. The high-pitched whine of an electric drill pierced the air. It was a harsh industrial sound that shattered the last remnants of the party atmosphere. It was the sound of ownership changing hands. Todd looked at the locksmiths. He looked at the guests, who were now backing away from him, pulling their coats from the rack, trying to dissociate themselves from the disaster. He saw his kingdom crumbling. He saw the illusion he had built with my money dissolving into sawdust and legal papers. He snapped. You can't do this, he shrieked. He grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the hallway table and smashed it on the floor. Glass shards exploded across the marble. You can't take my house. I have rights. I am a citizen. He turned toward me. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, and full of hate. He didn't see a father-in-law anymore. He saw the architect of his destruction. I am going to kill you, he roared. He lunged. He lowered his shoulder and charged at me like a linebacker. The crowd screamed. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I had done the math. I knew the distance between us, and I knew the reaction time of Sheriff Miller. Todd made it 3 steps. Before he could reach me, a heavy black boot stepped into his path. Sheriff Miller didn't strike him. He simply used Todd's own momentum against him. He grabbed Todd's arm, twisted it behind his back, and drove him face first into the wall. The sound of Todd's face hitting the expensive silk wallpaper was a dull thud. Todd Miller, you are under arrest, the sheriff said, his voice calm and bored. Get off me, Todd screamed, thrashing against the wall. His tuxedo ripped at the shoulder. This is police brutality. I am the homeowner. You can't arrest me in my own house. The sheriff pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. Click. Click. The sound was final. It was the period at the end of a long run-on sentence. You are under arrest for assault, attempted fraud, and grand larceny, the sheriff recited, spinning Todd around. Todd was panting, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. A trickle of blood ran from his nose where he had hit the wall. He looked at the guests. He looked for an ally. He looked for Mike, the car dealer. He looked for his drinking buddies. But they were all looking at their shoes. They were all checking their phones. Nobody wanted to make eye contact with the man in handcuffs. "This is a mistake," Todd yelled, straining against the metal cuffs. "Garrison, tell him this is a family dispute. You can't let them take me to jail on New Year's Eve." I stepped closer to him. I was close enough to smell the stale scotch on his breath and the fear coming off his skin. I looked him up and down. I looked at the ripped tuxedo. I looked at the blood. I looked at the man who had stolen my granddaughter's future to buy a truck. "It is not a family dispute, Todd," I said softly. "It is a business transaction, and you are in default." "I own this place," Todd screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "My name is on the deed." Ross stepped forward, holding a pen and a clipboard. Actually, Ross corrected him according to the filing recorded at 4:15 p.m. "Today, the deed has reverted to the lien holder. Mr. Ford is the owner of record. You are currently trespassing." Todd's knees buckled. The sheriff held him up, keeping him from collapsing onto the floor. "Get him out of here," I said to the sheriff. "I don't want him on my property." The sheriff began to drag Todd toward the door. Todd dug his heels into the marble, his expensive dress shoes sliding uselessly. "Beatrice," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Beatrice, where are you? Tell them, this is our house, help me." The guests parted like the Red Sea as the sheriff hauled him through the foyer. Todd twisted his head, scanning the room, looking for his wife. He expected her to come running. He expected her to throw herself at the sheriff's feet and beg for mercy. He expected the woman he had manipulated for years to save him one last time. But Beatrice wasn't in the crowd. I watched him go. I watched as the sheriff pushed him out into the cold night air. I saw the flashing lights of the patrol car illuminate the snow. I saw the neighbors standing on their porches watching the spectacle. When the door slammed shut, the silence returned. But it wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy with realization. I turned to face the room. There were about 50 people left. They were standing among the ruins of the party, holding half-empty glasses. "The party is over," I announced. My voice was tired. "Please leave. The locks are being changed in 5 minutes. Anyone remaining on the premises after that will be considered a trespasser." There was a scramble. Coats were grabbed. Purses were snatched up. People didn't say goodbye. They didn't say thank you. They just ran. They ran from the failure. They ran from the contagion of bad luck. Within 3 minutes, the house was empty. The music was gone. The guests were gone. The laughter was gone. I stood alone in the center of the living room. The drill of the locksmith was the only sound left. I looked at the melting ice swan. Its head had fallen off, dissolving into a puddle of water. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of stale perfume and justice. I walked over to the thermostat and turned the heat down. I wasn't paying to heat an empty house. Ross walked up to me, closing his briefcase. "The assets are frozen," Ross said. "The accounts are locked. The truck is being towed as we speak." "Good," I said. I looked up at the staircase. I knew Beatrice was up there. I knew she had been watching from the landing. "Is it done?" a small voice called out. I looked up. Beatrice was standing at the top of the stairs. She was holding a suitcase. "It is done," I said. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just nodded. She walked down the stairs, her hand trailing on the banister. She walked past the spot where her husband had been arrested. She walked past the spilled scotch. She walked right up to me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a set of keys. "Todd's keys." "I found these on the dresser," she said. She dropped them into my hand. They were heavy. "Let's go, Dad," she said. "I want to go home." We walked out of the mansion together. The locksmiths were finishing up the front door. They nodded to me as we passed. "Good night, mister," Ford, one of them, said. "Good night," I replied. We got into my car. I didn't look back at the house. It was just a building now, a collection of wood and stone that had cost too much and meant too little. I started the engine. The heater rattled, but it felt warm enough. As we drove away, I saw the tow truck hooking up the black monster truck in the driveway. It was a fitting end to the year. I drove into the night, leaving the wreckage behind, driving toward a new year that would be quieter, smaller, and infinitely richer. The air in the foyer was vibrating with the echo of my son-in-law's desperation. Todd was halfway out the door, his heels dragging against the marble he had once claimed was his birthright. The sheriff had a firm grip on his collar, but Todd twisted his body around his eyes, scanning the staircase like a drowning man looking for a lifeboat. "Beatrice," he screamed again, his voice raw and cracking. "Beatrice, for God's sake, get down here! Tell this lunatic that he can't do this. Tell him we have rights." And then she appeared. She didn't run. She didn't rush to the railing with tears in her eyes. Beatrice walked to the top of the landing with the slow, deliberate grace of a judge entering a courtroom. She was still wearing that simple black dress, but in that moment she looked like she was wearing armor. She held a single piece of paper in her hand. It wasn't trembling. The sheriff stopped pulling for a second, allowing the moment to hang in the air. Todd slumped against the doorframe, a look of wild relief washing over his face. He thought he had been saved. He thought his wife, the woman he had bullied and manipulated for 7 years, was about to throw herself between him and the law. "Baby, thank God," Todd panted, trying to straighten his ripped tuxedo. "Tell them! Tell your father he is insane. Tell them this is our marital home, and I do not consent to this search or this seizure." Beatrice took one step down, then another. The sound of her heels on the wood was the only noise in the house. The few remaining guests who were huddled by the coat rack trying to flee stopped to watch. It was a train wreck, and nobody could look away. "I can't do that," Beatrice said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to the back of the room. It had a steel core that I had not heard since she was a teenager. "What do you mean you can't?" Todd snapped, his old arrogance trying to surface through the panic. "I am your husband. I am the head of this household. I command you to tell them the truth." "I am telling them the truth," Beatrice said, reaching the bottom of the stairs. She stopped 10 feet away from him. She didn't move to touch him. She didn't offer him comfort. She looked at him with the detached curiosity of a scientist looking at a specimen in a jar. She held up the paper in her hand. "I signed this an hour ago, Todd." Todd squinted at the document. "What is that?" "It is a voluntary surrender of possession and a quitclaim deed," Beatrice said. She spoke the legal terms clearly, words I had taught her over coffee just that morning. "I have voluntarily relinquished my residency rights to Ford Holdings. I have admitted that the funds used to maintain this lifestyle were obtained through fraud. I have cooperated with the investigation, Todd." The color drained from Todd's face so completely that he looked like the ice sculpture melting in the corner. You what?" he whispered. "You sided with him." "With the old man, I sided with my daughter." Beatrice replied, her voice sharpening. "I sided with the child, whose college tuition you stole to buy a diamond necklace for a waitress in Miami." The mention of the necklace hit the room like a physical slap. Patricia, who had been standing by the hallway mirror clutching her chest and muttering about her nerves, suddenly went rigid. She looked at her son. She looked at Beatrice. And for the first time, she realized the gravity of the situation. She wasn't watching a family spat. She was watching her lifestyle evaporate. "You did what?" Patricia shrieked. Her voice was shrill and piercing. "Beatrice, you ungrateful little witch, how dare you? You can't just sign away my son's house. Where am I supposed to go? My room is upstairs. My things are here." Beatrice turned to her mother-in-law. She didn't flinch. You don't have a room, Patricia. You are a guest, and the host has just revoked your invitation. Patricia gasped. She brought a hand to her forehead in a gesture so theatrical it would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Her knees buckled. She didn't fall hard. She crumpled gracefully onto the Persian rug, making sure her dress fanned out around her. "I am fainting," she wailed, her eyes fluttering. "My heart." "You are killing me. I am having a heart attack. Someone call an ambulance. I cannot be homeless. I am a lady of status." Nobody moved. The sheriff rolled his eyes. "I just stood there watching the performance." "Get up, Mom!" Todd groaned, the humiliation finally piercing his thick skin. Beatrice didn't even look down at the woman on the floor. She kept her eyes locked on Todd. "I am done, Todd," she said. "I am done with the lies. I am done with the debt. And I am done with you. The divorce papers will be served to you in county jail." "County jail?" Todd laughed nervously, looking back at the sheriff. "Come on, Beatrice, don't be dramatic. It is just a civil dispute. I will be out on bail in an hour. It is just trespassing." The sheriff tightened his grip on the handcuffs. He leaned close to Todd's ear, but he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Actually, son, you might want to get comfortable," the sheriff said. "This isn't just about the trespassing. We just got a fax from the district attorney's office." Todd froze. "A fax. Apex Capital filed a criminal complaint against you at 5 p.m. today," the sheriff explained grimly. "When you signed that second mortgage, you falsified your income statements. You claimed assets you didn't own. That is wire fraud, bank fraud, and theft by deception. And since the amount is over $100,000, it is a Class 1 felony." Todd's knees gave out for real this time. He was dead weight in the sheriff's arms. The reality of the Apex loan, the predatory shark I had warned him about, the trap he had walked into, finally snapped shut. He wasn't going to a holding cell for a few hours. He was looking at 5 to 10 years in a state penitentiary. "No," Todd whimpered. "No, please. Garrison, help me. I will pay you back. I will work for you. I will do anything. Please don't let them take me." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had mocked my car, who had banned me from seeing my granddaughter, who had called me a dinosaur. I felt absolutely nothing. "The bank is closed, Todd," I said. The sheriff dragged him out the door. Todd was sobbing now, ugly heaving sobs that echoed off the stone pillars of the porch. The flashing blue lights of the patrol cars outside washed over the foyer, illuminating the scene. Patricia was still on the floor, peeking through one open eye to see if anyone was coming to help her. When she realized no one was, she sat up looking furious. "Well," Patricia spat, adjusting her wig. "Is someone going to drive me to a hotel, or do you expect me to walk in the snow?" Beatrice looked at her watch. "The Uber app is very easy to use, Patricia," Beatrice said coldly. "I suggest you hurry. The locksmiths are locking the back door in 2 minutes." Patricia scrambled to her feet. She grabbed her purse and her coat, muttering curses under her breath. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Beatrice. She scurried out the door like a rat fleeing a sinking ship, chasing after the police car that held her son, not to help him but to scoff for his wallet. And then it was quiet. The house was empty. The party was over. The only people left were me, my daughter, and the melting ice swan. Beatrice took a deep breath. Her shoulders slumped slightly, the adrenaline fading. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. It was a sad smile, but it was real. "I did it." "Dad," she whispered. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. She buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing quietly into my wool coat. I held her tight. I held her like I used to when she was 5 years old and scraped her knee. But this wound was deeper, and it would take longer to heal. "You did good, honey," I said. "You did good." She pulled back and wiped her eyes. She looked around the grand empty foyer. "I hate this house," she said. "I know," I replied. That is why we are selling it. I took her arm. We walked out of the open door, leaving the lights on for the ghost posts of the ambition that had died there. The cold wind hit us, but this time it didn't feel biting. It felt fresh. It felt like a new beginning. We walked to my car. I opened the door for her. "Where to?" I asked. "Home," she said. "The real one." I smiled. I started the engine. The heater rattled, but within a few minutes the car was warm. I drove away from 42 Oak Creek Drive without looking in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to see the past. I was driving my daughter toward the future. And for the first time in a long time, the ledger was balanced. The Cook County Jail on New Year's Day is a place where hope goes to die. The air inside the visitor center smelled of industrial bleach and stale sweat, a sharp contrast to the expensive cologne that had filled the air at Todd's party just 12 hours earlier. I sat on a metal stool that was bolted to the floor, my hands folded calmly on the stainless steel ledge in front of me. On the other side of the thick, scratched plexiglass sat the man who had called me a dinosaur. Todd looked like a ruin. He was still wearing the tuxedo from the night before, but the shirt was torn at the collar, stained with sweat and the blood from his nose. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was standing up in wild tufts. He didn't look like a visionary investor anymore. He looked like a hungover waiter who had been in a bar fight. When he saw me, he didn't hang his head in shame. He didn't cover his face. He slammed his fist against the glass, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. "You happy now, Garrison?" he hissed. His voice was raspy, stripped raw from a night of screaming at booking officers. "You must be so proud of yourself. You put the father of your grandchild in a cage." I looked at him with the same expression I used to wear when reviewing a bankruptcy filing. I felt no pity, only a detached curiosity about how deep his delusion went. "I didn't put you here, Todd," I said calmly. "The district attorney did, the fraud unit did, and the forensic accountant from Apex Capital did. I am just a spectator." Todd let out a bitter, incredulous laugh. He leaned in until his forehead was resting against the glass, his eyes manic. "Don't give me that innocent act," he spat. "You orchestrated this. You timed it. You waited until the party. You wanted to humiliate me. You could have come to me quietly. You could have written a check to cover the Apex loan. You have the money. It would have been pocket change for you." I shook my head slowly. He still didn't get it. He still thought this was about a balance sheet error. "I am not your insurance policy, Todd," I said. "And I am certainly not your ATM. You stole from my granddaughter. You leveraged a property you didn't own. You committed a felony because you wanted to look rich for strangers. I was doing it for the family." Todd screamed, drawing the attention of a guard who took a step closer. "I was trying to build something. I was 1 week away from a massive return on the crypto investment." 1 week, Garrison. If you had just waited, I would have paid you back double. I would have bought the house from you. I would have made you look like a fool. "It is always just 1 week away with you, isn't it?" I asked. "It is always the next deal, the next scheme, the next big break. You live in a future that never arrives, Todd, while destroying the present for everyone around you." Todd wiped his nose with the back of his hand. He looked at me with pure venom. "You are just jealous," he sneered. "You are a bitter, lonely old man who hates that I have a life. You hate that Beatrice loves me. You hate that I am young and ambitious. You did this to control her. But guess what? It won't work. When I get out of here, she is going to take me back. She knows us. I am a victim of your vendetta. She knows I love her." I reached into the inside pocket of my suit jacket. I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of the divorce petition Beatrice had signed that morning with Ross. "She doesn't know anything of the sort," I said. I held the paper up to the glass. Todd squinted at it. He read the words dissolution of marriage. He read the words sole custody. He read the restraining order request attached to the back. His face crumbled. For the first time, the anger was replaced by genuine fear. The narcissist realized he had lost his supply. She didn't sign this, he stammered. You forced her. You brainwashed her. She drove herself to the lawyer Todd, I said. She is done. She saw the photos from Miami. She saw the receipt for the diamond necklace. She knows everything. Todd slumped back in his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and realized he couldn't glue it back together. I can fix it, he whispered. I just need bail. Garrison, please. Post the bail. It is set at $50,000. I know you have it. Just get me out of here so I can talk to her. I can explain. I can make her understand. I stood up. The metal stool scraped against the concrete floor. I am not posting your bail, Todd, I said. But why, he pleaded, tears finally welling up in his eyes. Not tears of remorse, but tears of self-pity. Why do you hate me so much? I let you see Lily. I invited you to holidays. I treated you like family. I leaned in close to the glass. This was it. The final lesson. That is your problem, Todd. I said, my voice low and hard. You thought allowing me to see my own granddaughter was a favor you were granting me. You thought treating me with basic human decency was a transaction that I should pay for. You thought respect was something you sold, not something you earned. Todd stared at me, his mouth open. You looked at my kindness and saw weakness, I continued. You looked at my silence and saw stupidity. You thought because I was old, I was obsolete. But you forgot the most important rule of business and of life. You never bite the hand that feeds you. And you certainly never ever steal from the hand that holds the deed. I buttoned my coat. Beatrice is safe. Lily is safe. The house is mine. And you, Todd, you are exactly where you belong. You wanted a life free of my oversight. You have it. You are on your own. I turned my back on him. Garrison, he screamed. Garrison, don't walk away. I am your family. I kept walking toward the heavy steel door. I didn't look back. The guard stepped forward to escort Todd back to his cell. As the door buzzed open, letting me out into the crisp, clean air of the parking lot, I heard Todd's voice one last time echoing down the sterile hallway, blaming the judge, blaming the bank, blaming the world. He would never learn. He would never change. But that was no longer my problem. I had a granddaughter to raise, and for the first time in years, I had a balance sheet that was perfectly, beautifully clear. The snow in Chicago was finally starting to melt, turning the streets into a slush of gray water and salt. But inside the townhouse on Maple Avenue, everything was clean, dry, and warm. It was January 15th. 2 weeks had passed since the night of the party. 2 weeks since the handcuffs clicked shut. 2 weeks since the silence of the mansion was replaced by the chaotic, healing noise of moving boxes and new beginnings. I stood in the kitchen of the new house. It was not a mansion. It did not have a marble foyer or a crystal chandelier that cost more than a car. It was a sturdy red brick townhouse in a neighborhood where people actually knew each other's names. It had 3 bedrooms, a small garden in the back, and most importantly, it had a front door that belonged to us free and clear. Beatrice was kneeling on the floor unpacking a box of kitchenware. She looked different. The dark circles under her eyes were fading. The tension that used to hold her shoulders up by her ears was gone. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked like the daughter I remembered before Todd had turned her into a prop for his ego. "This place is small, Dad," she said, pulling out a stack of plates. "It is efficient," I corrected her, leaning against the granite counter. "It has lower heating costs, lower property taxes, and significantly less space for ghosts to hide." She smiled. It was a genuine smile. "I like it," she said. It feels safe. It is safe, I said. And I want to keep it that way. That is why we need to talk about the paperwork. I walked over to the small breakfast table where I had laid out a thick binder. Beatrice wiped her hands on her jeans and sat down opposite me. She looked at the binder with a hint of her old anxiety. Is that the lease? She asked. Not exactly, I said. I opened the binder. This is the deed to the property, but you will notice that your name is not on it. Neither is mine. Beatrice leaned in, reading the text at the top of the page. The Lily Ford Irrevocable Trust, she read aloud. She looked up at me, confused. What does that mean? It means that this house does not belong to a person, I explained. It belongs to a legal entity created solely for the benefit of your daughter. I am the trustee, and you are the beneficiary. But the ownership is locked. I saw a flash of hurt in her eyes. You don't trust me, she whispered. You think I will sign it over to another man. You think I will make the same mistake again. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. My skin was papery and old, hers was smooth but scarred by invisible wounds. I trust you, Beatrice, I said softly, but I do not trust the world. And I do not trust the part of you that was trained to be a victim. Todd preyed on your generosity. He preyed on your desire to be loved. He got you to sign papers because you wanted to please him. I tapped the binder. This trust protects you from your own kindness, I continued. If you meet someone new and he asks you to mortgage the house to fund his business, you can look him in the eye and say, I can't. I don't own it. If someone tries to sue you, they can't touch this roof. This house is a fortress, Beatrice, and I am giving you the only key. Beatrice looked at the document for a long time. She traced the letters of her daughter's name. She realized then that I wasn't controlling her. I was armoring her. Thank you, Dad, she said. She picked up a pen and signed the beneficiary acknowledgement. Her signature was strong. It didn't waver. Now, I said, closing the binder. Let's talk about revenue. A house is an asset, but it needs cash flow. Beatrice sat up straighter. She reached into her bag and pulled out a letter. She handed it to me with a look of nervous pride. I went to the school district office yesterday, she said. I reactivated my teaching certification. It had been expired for 5 years, but because of the shortage of substitute teachers, they fast-tracked the renewal. I opened the letter. It was an employment offer. Substitute teacher for the county public school system. The pay was modest. It was a fraction of what Todd used to spend on dinner. But it was honest. I start on Monday, she said. It is 4th grade. And Dad, yes, I opened a checking account, she said. At a credit union. In my name only. I deposited the refund check from the jewelry store. I returned the diamond necklace. I felt a lump in my throat. I looked at the offer letter again. You returned the necklace, I asked. I didn't want it, she said. It felt heavy. I took it back. They gave me 80% of the value. It is enough to buy a used car and pay for groceries for 6 months. I looked at her. She wasn't a child anymore. She wasn't a trophy wife. She was a woman rebuilding her life brick by brick. I am proud of you, I said. And I meant it more than any time I had praised her for a good report card or a piano recital. This was real life, and she was acing the test. Just then, a thundering noise came from the hallway. Lily ran into the kitchen, her socks sliding on the hardwood floor. She was holding a plastic train engine. Grandpa, she yelled. Grandpa, come look, I set it up, I did it all by myself. We followed her into the living room. There, in the center of the rug, was the train set. The one I had brought on Christmas Eve. The one that had sat on the porch in the snow. Lily had assembled the tracks in a perfect figure 8. She had set up the little plastic station and the miniature trees. She pressed a button on the remote, and the train whistled. It chugged along the track, its little headlight cutting through the afternoon shadows. Lily clapped her hands, jumping up and down. "Look at it go!" she screamed. "It is fast." I sat down on the floor next to her. My knees cracked, but I didn't care. I watched the train go round and round. It was a simple toy. But in that moment, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "It is perfect, Lily," I said. Beatrice sat down beside us. She watched the train, and then she looked at me. "We are going to be okay, aren't we?" she asked. I looked around the small living room. I looked at the sturdy walls. I thought about the trust fund document in the kitchen. I thought about Todd sitting in a cell blaming the universe for his math errors. And I thought about the job offer in Beatrice's pocket. "We are not just going to be okay, Beatrice," I said, picking up the train controller and handing it to her. "We are going to be solvent. And in this family, that is the highest form of happiness." Beatrice laughed. It was a light, free sound. She pushed the button, and the train sped up. I stayed for dinner. We ordered pizza. We ate it on the floor because the dining table hadn't arrived yet. It was the best meal I had eaten in years. When I finally left, walking out to my car under the clear winter sky, I didn't feel the need to look back to make sure they were safe. I knew they were. I had done my job. I had balanced the ledger. The bad debt had been written off. The assets had been secured. And the investment in my family was finally starting to show a return. The ice on Lake Michigan is finally breaking up. I am sitting on a bench in the park, watching the jagged white sheets dissolve into the dark blue water. It is March now. The winter that almost broke me is over, and the air smells like wet earth and possibility. For the first time in 3 years, I am not worrying about a phone call I need to make. I am not worrying about a bank transfer I need to approve. I am just watching the water. People often ask me if I regret it. They ask if I feel guilty for sending my son-in-law to prison and evicting my family from a mansion. They look at me with pity, thinking I am a lonely old man who chose money over love. They are wrong. I didn't choose money. I chose dignity. And for the first time in my life, I am not lonely. I am simply at peace. I used to believe that family was a permanent contract. I thought that because we shared blood, or because I had made a promise to my late wife, I had to endure the disrespect. I thought that being a father meant being a doormat. I thought that if I just wrote one more check, if I just forgave one more insult, they would finally love me. But I learned the hard way that you cannot buy respect. You can only command it. There is a medical term for cells that take resources from the body without contributing anything in return. We call it cancer. And when you have a tumor, you don't negotiate with it. You don't ask it to be nicer. You cut it out. It is painful. It leaves a scar. But it is the only way to save the patient. Todd was a tumor in my family. Cutting him out was the most violent thing I have ever done, but it was also the greatest act of love I could perform. I saved my daughter. I saved my granddaughter. And most importantly, I saved myself. To anyone listening to my voice right now, I want you to look at the people at your table. Do they respect you, or do they just respect what you provide? Do they ask how you are, or do they only ask where the money is? Family is not a shield that protects people from the consequences of their actions. It is a privilege, and like any privilege, it can be revoked. I am Garrison Ford. I am 70 years old, and my net worth is not measured in dollars anymore. It is measured in the quiet breakfasts I have with my daughter. It is measured in the sound of my granddaughter's train set chugging around the track. The ledger is finally balanced. The debt is paid, and I am finally free. If my story resonated with you, if you have ever had to stand up to a bully in your own home, please let me know in the comments below. Where are you watching from? What would you have done in my shoes? Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and redemption. Remember, it is never too late to rewrite your will, and it is never too late to rewrite your life. See you in the next story.